Welcome back to the Explainer Focus Learners. Today we're jumping right into a really fascinating theological paper by Ryan McLean. It's called The Event is the Meaning. And right off the bat, the author proposes this incredibly unique premise. He suggests that Jesus' words and actions aren't separate things, but they actually form one single unified act of revelation. The core idea here: Christ doesn't just describe reality through, abstract lectures. He literally enacts the structure of reality by living it out.
So think of the gospel narrative as the ultimate mystery novel. The author frames this perfectly using a quote from Roald Dahl. Throughout the text, the disciples are basically acting like detectives. They're constantly collecting these clues, sayings, parables, weird prophetic statements that they simply don't understand yet. They are living through a story where the greatest secrets are hidden in plain sight, just waiting for the exact right moment to finally make sense.
And that leads us to a really intriguing question, doesn't it? Why give the test before the lesson? The paper observes that Jesus is perhaps the only teacher in history who deliberately does this. He almost never explains his most profound teachings up front. Instead, he speaks in these cryptic ways that deliberately let his followers sit in confusion. He forces them to wait for the answer to unfold in real time. Let's get into part 1, a lesson before the explanation. To really grasp why this confusion is actually a deliberate feature, not a bug, the author uses this brilliant child-friendly analogy. Imagine your teacher walks into the classroom and writes one totally weird sentence on the board. The pencil will save the classroom. And then she just refuses to explain it. You'd probably think she'd lost her mind. But a few hours later, the power goes out, the computers crash, and suddenly you realize you have to use a paper map to finish your project. All of a sudden, the only way forward is with a pencil. The sentence didn't change, and the pencil didn't magically transform. The event explained the sentence.
Moving on to part 2, the grammar of revelation.
Okay, so to solve these gospel puzzles, the author proposes a specific cipher, a 4-part structural backbone. Step 1 is the utterance. Jesus speaks a word that points beyond itself. Step 2 is the event. An actual action happens in history that gives that word a concrete form. Step 3 is remembrance. After the event, the disciples look back and remember what Jesus originally said. And finally, step 4 is recognition. They completely recognize the true meaning of the word, but only in light of the history they just lived through. Basically, a spoken word absolutely requires a lived event to trigger true understanding. And this 4-part pattern isn't just an isolated incident. It is meticulously mapped out across the entire gospel narrative. We see it with the cleansing of the temple, the raising of Lazarus, the foot washing, and, of course, the crucifixion and resurrection. Christ's words prepare the hearer, and his actions complete their meaning. Right, let's jump into part 3, solving the gospel puzzles. Let's put this cipher to work and see how it builds our understanding of Jesus' most famously confusing moments. We'll start with a classic mystery from the Gospel of John. Jesus drives the merchants out of the temple, and when he's challenged about his authority, he says, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." Now, his listeners naturally assume he is talking about the literal physical stone building in Jerusalem. But look at what happens when we apply our key. On the left, we've got the confusing utterance. On the right, the eventual historical event. It is only after Jesus dies and rises from the dead that the disciples finally remember his words and realize, oh, he wasn't talking about architecture at all. The resurrection acts as the cipher that redefines the temple as his own body. The event doesn't just prove he was right, the event is the actual meaning. Okay, let's try another puzzle. Jesus tells Martha, "I am the resurrection and the life." Now, seriously, how can a person claim to literally be a future historical event? It's a staggering, almost impossible statement to comprehend if you're just viewing it as an abstract theological proposition. But Jesus doesn't just hand out a worksheet on eternal life. He gives the utterance, and then he enacts the truth. He walks right over to a tomb and calls a dead man named Lazarus to come outside, and Lazarus stumbles out in his burial cloths. This miracle isn't just some magic trick to grab attention, it's the event that completes the meaning of those earlier words. He reveals reality by living it. To really anchor these dense theological concepts, I love this plain English summary from the author's analogies. The story happens, then our hearts understand. It perfectly captures the essence of John's gospel. The disciples are collecting all these puzzle pieces, but they have no idea what they are building until history flips the box over to reveal the final picture.
Now for part 4, the mystery of Gethsemane.
So this is where we apply this framework to the ultimate boss battle of biblical interpretation. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus prays this famous line,
And honestly, read in total isolation, it really does seem like he's suddenly terrified, asking for a way out of the exact mission he's been preaching about. It looks like a massive interruption of his divine plan.
But as the paper points out, we absolutely cannot read that in isolation. Before Gethsemane, Jesus repeatedly predicts his own suffering and death. He deliberately approaches this hour, identifying it as his entire purpose. And when the soldiers arrive, he steps forward freely to be arrested. He wasn't surprised by the cross, guys. He walked toward it knowingly. And according to the author, that fact deepens the mystery of his prayer immensely. To solve this, the paper redefines our understanding of the cup. People often think the cup is just a static symbol for God's wrath or suffering. But looking at the broader biblical context, the cup is actually a relational reality. It's an appointed participation, an assignment given by a giver that has to be received, drunk, and brought to its intended completion. The author actually injects a bit of relatable humor here with the gross medicine analogy. Imagine your mom hands you a little cup of terrible-tasting cough medicine. You ask, do I really have to drink this? Your question isn't about the plastic cup itself, right? It's about the assignment. And how does that cup finally get removed from your life? Not by ignoring it, but by emptying it. A cup finishes its job only after it is fully consumed. Which brings us to part 5. The event is the meaning. Let's map out how this entire passion sequence functions as the final, dramatic answer to the Gethsemane prayer. In Gethsemane, Jesus utters the conditional prayer. But the answer to that prayer wasn't a spoken sentence. It was this grueling historical timeline. He receives the cup by allowing his arrest. He endures and completes the work on the cross, declaring it is finished. And on the third day, he's raised. The paper summarizes this resolution perfectly with a marathon analogy. If a runner at the starting line asks if there's another way to the finish, and then proceeds to run all 26 agonizing miles to cross the finish line, you wouldn't say the race was canceled. You'd say the race was finished. The cup in Gethsemane truly passed, not because Jesus avoided it, but because he received it completely, finished the race, and came out the other side alive. And so, we arrive at the core thesis of the whole paper. Christ reveals the deepest structure of reality, not by merely describing it from a safe distance, but by becoming its historical form. The cross isn't just a symbol to verify his teachings, it is revelation incarnate. Jesus speaks the question in the garden, and the passion and resurrection serve as the enacted, historical answer. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you, the focused learner, with a really provocative thought. If the author is right, if reality is revealed not through abstract facts, but through lived events, suffering, and completion, how does that change the way we experience our own challenges? Perhaps it encourages us to look beyond just searching for the perfect words and instead see the enacted narrative unfolding in our own lives. Thanks for learning with us today, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.